Mr. Acting Speaker. I acknowledge the Deputy Chief Justice and all my colleagues in the Constitutional Court. I would like to also acknowledge the retired justices of the Constitutional Court who are here today. Thank you very much for coming to this special sitting. I acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mr. Jeffrey, who attends in the place of the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, who sent in his apology and indicated that the Deputy Minister would be able to attend. I would also like to acknowledge the Deputy President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, who is leading the justices of the Supreme Court of Appeal, and I acknowledge his colleagues as well, other justices of the Supreme Court of Appeal who are here. I also wish to acknowledge the judges president of the various divisions of the High Court and of the specialist courts who are here, as well as all their colleagues, judges from the various divisions of the High Court who are here, as well as judges from the specialist courts. I would like to also acknowledge any former ministers who might be here, including Dr. Penuel Maduna and Ambassador Bridget Mabandla. I acknowledge the National Director of Public Prosecution, Advocate Shamila Patoi, the Director General in the Presidency and Secretary to Cabinet, Ms. Pindile Baleni, the Secretary General of the Office of the Chief Justice, Ms. Sejo Sengwe, representatives of the legal profession, members of the boards on which Justice Mokgoro served, deans and senior representatives of universities that Justice Mokgoro closely associated with, Advocate Dumisan Sebeza, who represents the African Court of Human and People's Rights, all government officials in attendance, members of the public who are in attendance, and those following these proceedings virtually via a number of mediums. Members of the media present here today, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I have already indicated the purpose of this ceremony, and I want to take this opportunity to welcome all of you who have made time to be with us. we are gathered to remember our sister and colleague, Justice Yvonne Mokgoro, and to celebrate her life. She passed on the 9th of May, following upon an accident that occurred on the 3rd of April last year. We are going to have various speakers who will speak, who represent certain organizations or constituencies. And I will indicate shortly the time allocation. Where's the list? We are going to allocate 5 minutes to each speaker, except for the acting Speaker of Parliament and the Deputy Minister, the Speaker of Parliament representing another arm of the state and the Deputy Minister representing another arm of the state. They will be afforded 10 minutes each. We are going to start immediately, and the first speaker is going to be the President of Nadel, Mr. Mvuzo Nochesi.
Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, retired Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke, Justices of the Constitutional Court and members of the Judiciary, members of the Mokgoro family, Deputy Minister of Justice, colleagues, friends, and all present. On hearing the sad news regarding the passing of Justice Mokgoro, one was immediately reminded of a prayer by Reverend Mtwa on the occasion of the funeral of the late Sabelo Palmer, who was then the Chief of Staff of the Pan-Africanist Congress then. He says, I quote, "God, forgive us our sins. In return, we will give you all the dishonest and the thieves, so that you preserve the honest." And this prayer, I close quote. Immediately, we hear about the death of Justice Mokgoro. Nadel says this should not have happened. For these reasons, Justice Mokgoro had a remarkable life and legacy. She was not a legal luminary. She embodied the essence of integrity, wisdom, and compassion in all that she did. Throughout her illustrious career, Justice Mokgoro blazed a trail in the legal field, leaving an indelible mark on the judiciary and the society at large. Justice Mokgoro's commitment to justice, fairness, and the rule of law was the cornerstone of her distinguished career in the legal profession and served as a beacon of hope for many, inspiring countless individuals to strive for a more equitable and just society. Throughout her career, she upheld the principles of justice by ensuring that legal proceedings were conducted impartially, fairly, and in accordance with the law. She believed in equitable access to justice for all individuals, regardless of their background or social status. During court proceedings, she never unnecessarily interrupted those who appeared before her. She was a patient listener, and she would listen to the detail of what was submitted. Justice Mokgoro was a staunch advocate for fairness in the legal system. She believed that all individuals should be treated with dignity and respect before the law, and she worked tirelessly to ensure that legal proceedings were transparent, accountable, and free from bias or discrimination. She was a firm believer in the rule of law as the foundation of a society. Justice Mokgoro was actively involved in the legal reform initiatives aimed at strengthening the legal framework and enhancing access to justice for all members of the society. She recognized the need for continuous improvement and adaptation of the law to address evolving social changes and to better protect the rights of vulnerable populations. Her commitment to justice, fairness, and the rule of law was closely intertwined with her advocacy for human rights. Justice Mokgoro's legacy goes beyond her legal achievements. It is rooted in her humanity and dedication to upholding the rights and dignity of all individuals. Justice Mokgoro's legal achievements are a testament to her exceptional skills, dedication, and contribution to the legal profession. As we gather here today to honor Justice Mokgoro's memory, let us not only celebrate her remarkable contribution to the legal profession, but also reflect on the values she embodied: courage, integrity, and empathy. Let us carry forward her legacy by championing the causes she held dearly and by upholding the principles of justice and human rights. The loss of Justice Mokgoro is deeply felt by the legal profession, members of Nadel, the country, the judiciary, and all the people of South Africa. Our thoughts and prayers are with Justice Mokgoro's family, friends, and colleagues during these difficult times. May her memory be a blessing to all who had the privilege of knowing her and those who will read her work. And while we are certain that Justice Mokgoro has been laid to rest, there is comfort in knowing that her good works and achievement will follow her and will continue to inspire us to strive for a more just and equitable society. Oh, why, instead of her, not taking the dishonest and the thieving citizens in this country? Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nochesi, and for keeping within the time as well. The next speaker will be a representative of the Legal Practice Council, Mr. Mabunda. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Please allow me to follow the protocol as clearly put forward by the Chief Justice. By the same token, equally acknowledging the presence, amongst others, of former judges of this honorable court, the Constitutional Court of the Republic of South Africa. I just threw my eyes and equally recognized the former Deputy Chief Justice Mseleke. I see Judge Edwin Cameron, and I see one of the first justices of the Constitutional Court. I see Judge Richard Goldstone. I might be failing in my eyes. I see Judge Van der Westhuizen and other judges whom I might be failing to see in that event. Judge Beska being there. Yes, and I've observed the protocol there. A lot has been said about an amazing individual, an amazing human being, a person whom I will fail if I have to give descriptions. There are those who have said a lot before. There are those who will still be saying a lot about this wonderful departed human being in the form or name of Justice Yvonne Mokgoro. Pertinently and importantly is the fact that she was among those who were the first justices to grace this honorable court and be bestowed with the powers of interpretation and application of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Given that she was fresh from the academic world as a renowned professor of law at the University, I would say, of Botswana, before it became Northwest University. She came with a particular kind of ethos which was unprecedented, given the fact that initially the justices were drawn from the ranks of senior counsels, and for a court of this magnitude, it would have been expected that you should be coming from a justice, you must have been a judge before. But the indelible mark and impression which he made with respect to inculcating the spirit of Ubuntu to manifest itself and become one of the constitutional ethos within which we were expected and are expected to live and imbibe and make sure that all the ideals and aspirations for our people, for which this Constitution is made for, it becomes the bedrock in terms of expectation, in terms of going forward. We will remember her. We will remember Justice Mokgoro in terms of the contribution which she had made. In respect of time, Chief Justice, allow me to say that the regulatory body in this country, being the Legal Practice Council, joins society and the country in general in remembering Justice Mokgoro. May she rest in peace while we will be living the ethos for time immemorial. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mabunda. The next speaker is the Vice Chairperson of the Law Society of South Africa, Ms. Eunice Masipa.
it on. Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, may you kindly allow me to stand on the protocol that you've already observed in the interest of time. As the Law Society of South Africa, we are deeply saddened by the passing of Justice Yvonne Mokgoro. As the previous speaker has already stated, that a lot of statements have been issued, a lot of speakers have spoke, and there is really much that can be said about the late Justice. As I followed the story of how she became a legal practitioner, I watched one of the interviews where she was narrating how she became a legal practitioner. In that story, she says that when there was the uprisings and she had initially registered for a degree to study a BA. So when the universities closed at that time, they went back home, and by chance she got into trouble with authorities. And her family then acquired the services of Robert Sobukwe to represent her. So when she was looking for a representative to assist her, she struggled to find someone to assist her. The question she asked Robert Sobukwe was, but where are legal practitioners? Where are lawyers? Where are the males? And what Robert Sobukwe said to her, or the question she asked her, but why don't you ask, where are the female lawyers? Are you aware that you can also become a lawyer? She was not aware of that. But because of a male who believed in the capacity of a young female, she then took a decision to mentor her. She then deregistered for that BA and registered for her BProc, which then saw her to become a legal practitioner. And with that, I think legal practitioners should then start taking a leaf from Robert Sobukwe's life to capacitate and to mentor female legal practitioners is to also assist in nation building. It is also to assist in developing jurisprudence for the country. And by virtue of the confidence that Robert Sobukwe had in the late Justice, we saw the remarkable work that she did. I also call upon female practitioners, female organizations of organized body to say, let us not leave male practitioners behind in the debates we have with regards to challenges of female legal practitioners. It could be that they are not aware of the challenges that we face. Let them be part of the discussions, let them be part of the debate. I'm certain that they are willing and they want to be conscious of the challenges that we are facing. I heard that just before she had an accident, there was a celebration that Saula was having for her. And in that particular function, she had said that legal or female legal practitioners need to capacitate themselves. Do not rely on the fact that you are female. You need to have capacity. You need to have knowledge. You need to fill up your bag and break the glass ceiling. And as you do that, you raise others with you. And in the interest of time, Chief Justice, I just want to say from the legal profession, from the Law Society of South Africa, and also allow me to speak for the Pan-African Lawyers Union as I served as the Vice President, to say that we are deeply saddened. We convey our condolences to the Mokgoro family. We thank them for sharing her with us, and we will forever remember her and refer to her jurisprudence, which clearly reflect the principles of Ubuntu. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is reflected here as a representative of the Pan-African Bar Association of South Africa, Advocate Dumisani Sebeza, SC.
Chief Justice, you have fully indicated we should be acknowledged in salutations. And I adopt everything that you said in doing so. I merely wish to state that whilst it is an honor for me to be a judge of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, I however do not represent that court at these proceedings. as was indicated in your opening speech.
I apologize. That I read what was written. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chief Justice, those salutations that you made at the beginning, I adopt and I accept. And to those to whom I have inadvertently, not formally mentioned, I greet you too. And with that, let me be permitted to say what usually gets said. All protocols have been observed. Chief Justice, it's almost a dozen years since August 2013 when I stood on this very same podium paying homage and tribute to the late Chief Justice Pius Langa at an occasion not unlike this one. In his career, he had time as an academic, just as was the case then. In this case, I find myself today coming to pay homage and tribute to a woman who once was an academic and a seasoned jurist, whose juridical talents, as we have heard throughout this period of mourning her demise, were enjoyed not only here, but in neighboring countries in the SADC region. So talented was she. I come here at the request of the national chair of PABASA, the Pan-Africanist, or the Pan-African Bar Association of South Africa, whose constitution will tell you that PABASA was founded for Africans, more particularly, and for women, more relevantly for today's ceremony. PABASA has committed itself through its memoirs or through its members to independence, the promotion of democracy, gender equality, anti-racism, anti-sexism, the protection and enhancement of the rule of law, to the ideal of an open society founded on human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedoms. I make bold, Chief Justice, to say that Justice Mokgoro would have been a member of PABASA. It is therefore apt that PABASA's president sent me to pay homage to the illustrious career, both as an academic and a jurist. Everything that could possibly be said has already been said. And I only have 5 minutes. I don't know whether I've gone beyond 5 minutes already. But from the everything was said from the very moving tribute by you, Chief Justice, at the funeral, and to various commentators and jurists of note themselves. I recall comments made on the occasion of Justice Mokgoro's funeral, even on the sidelines thereof, where tributes were paid to the late Justice Mokgoro by luminaries like Justice Mseneke, who was Deputy Chief Justice in this court. I can do no more than those luminaries in paying homage to the late Justice Mokgoro, almost to a man and a woman. Every commentator has more or less either directly or indirectly touched upon Justice Mokgoro's seminal judgments, but especially her articulation in State versus Makwanyane of Ubuntu as a value. She called it an emerging value at the time in South African law. Its power as a transformative tool to engender a new, distinctively African law to South Africa's maturing, relatively young democracy. We all know that this word does not appear in the so-called Final Constitution 108 of 1996. However, we know that in the interim constitution, and there is a story about, which I will not go into that, there is a post-amble which reads as follows: the adoption of this constitution lays the secure foundation for the people of South Africa to transcend the divisions and strife of the past, which generated gross violations of human rights, the transgressions of humanitarian principles in violent conflicts, and a legacy of hatred, fear, guilt, and revenge. These can now be addressed on the basis that there is a need for understanding, but not vengeance, a need for reparation, but not for retaliation, a need for Ubuntu.
If you can try and wrap up.
As the Chief Justice pleases. Those who, like Judge Mokgoro, appreciated that there is a need and a basis for the judicial application of the concept of Ubuntu, namely its link to restorative justice, will agree that Justice Mokgoro was an embodiment of those views. As I conclude my tribute, I cannot but think that her outlook at this court particularly was also informed by the fact that she was joining a profession which in the dawn of the post-apartheid democracy only had 2 women who were judges. In fact, in 1994, there were judges van den Heever in the then Appellate Division and Traverso DJP in the Cape High Court. Anyone who knows just a little of Judge Mokgoro will agree with me that all the attributes that could be given for the eternalization of the concept of Ubuntu in our jurisprudence.
I think I think you have gone far beyond 5 minutes. So I think you have wrapped up. You have wrapped up, I think.
Not for the first time, Chief Justice.
I know.
May your soul rest in peace, in eternal peace. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you very much. Before I call upon the next speaker, I have been informed that there are members of the Buffel family present here, and I just want to acknowledge their presence and to say thank you very much for coming to this ceremony. I was not aware earlier on that they were here as well. Thank you very much. The next speaker is the chairperson of the General Council of the Bar and chairperson of the Advocates for Transformation, Advocate Myron Durance, SC.
Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, members of the judiciary. We commemorate a remarkable individual whose legacy epitomizes courage, strength, and unwavering dedication to justice, a profound impact in the legal field, and a commitment to upholding the rule of law have shaped the course of South Africa's legal landscape. Justice Mokgoro's trailblazing spirit and advocacy for women's rights have paved the way for future generation of legal professions. A membership in the International Association of Women Judges and a recognition as an icon of the history of women lawyers in South Africa highlight the significant influence she wielded, both nationally and globally. Her influence on the legal profession, particularly in advocating for women's rights and promotion of equal access to justice, has been profound and far-reaching. Today, the legal profession has been making strides in what we have seen a significant increase in the number of women advocates. As a trailblazer of transformation in the legal profession, Justice Mokgoro will be remembered for her unwavering dedication to ensuring equal access to justice for all in a period where South Africa was transitioning from apartheid to democracy. Her career has been one of inspiration to many young female lawyers, judges, and advocates. As advocates, we often look to people like Justice Mokgoro for guidance in tackling some of society's most difficult issues. As the current chairperson of the General Council of the Bar of South Africa and Advocates for Transformation, and a former student of Justice Mokgoro, I hope to draw from the example set by Justice Mokgoro so that I too can become a pioneer for transformation in the legal profession and system, both to address racial injustice of our past and to address inequality faced by women in our profession. Our contributions to issues concerning the protection of children, vulnerable communities, and gender parity in the legal profession will resonate for years to come. Justice Mokgoro's legacy stands as a testament to the enduring values of principles, courage, and commitment in the pursuit of justice and equality. Justice Mokgoro brought to bear her life views and expressed them in many ways that continue to shape the Ubuntu jurisprudence. As a constitutional court judge, her distinct voice emerged from the very first case decided by this court in State v. Makwanyane, in which the death penalty was declared unconstitutional. In a judgment, Justice Mokgoro introduced Ubuntu as one shared value and ideal that runs like a golden thread across cultural lines in South Africa. She describes it as humanity, personhood, and morality, group solidarity, compassion, respect, human dignity, conformity to basic norms, and collective unity. Her embodiment of values such as Ubuntu jurisprudence have set the precedent that will echo for ages to come. As we mourn the loss of a legal luminary, we extend our deepest sympathies to the family. May they find comfort in the enduring legacy of Justice Mokgoro, which continues to inspire us in a collective pursuit of justice and equality. Let us all draw strength from her courage and resilience as we strive to uphold the principles she championed throughout her career. Justice Yvonne Mokgoro's legacy will continue to illuminate the path towards a more just and equitable society for all. Her contributions to defending the core tenets of justice, equality, and human rights remain an enduring testament to remarkable life and work. May her memory serve as a guiding light for future generations seeking to walk in her footsteps and to uphold the ideals she held dear. As we reflect on her life work, may we extend our heartfelt condolences to her family. May they find solace in knowing that Justice Mokgoro's legacy continues to inspire us and guides us to a more just and equitable society. Let us strive to embody her courage and resilience in our own pursuit of justice and human rights for all. May her soul rest in peace. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the National Director of Public Prosecutions.
Thank you, and good morning to, firstly, members of the Mokgoro and the Buffels family, Honorable Chief Justice, Justice Maya, various other justices present, distinguished guests, the Deputy Minister, Acting Speaker, Chair of the NCOP, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, thank you very much for extending the invitation to the NPA to be part of this memorial service in honor of the late Justice Yvonne Mokgoro. Justice Mokgoro, as we've heard, was a trailblazer on several fronts, not least of which because she was the first black woman to be appointed as a judge in October 1994. She not only opened the way for other black women to join the profession and the judiciary, but she also, as we've heard, contributed to the building of an influential and much-needed jurisprudence on human rights and to infusing the concept of Ubuntu, Boto, into South African law. These deep-seated principles of respect for human rights, human dignity, integrity, and Ubuntu permeated her brief time as a public prosecutor in the Mabato Magistrates Court early on in her legal career. In an interview that Justice Mokgoro gave a few years back to Professor Daniel Plaikes, she recalled the challenges that she faced as a prosecutor under apartheid. And at a time when prosecutors were often regarded, as she put it, at the other end of justice. As a prosecutor, she defended her role as an officer of the court, whose role it was to assist the court to find the truth and not a conviction at all costs, which is something that we instill into prosecutors to this day. Justice Mokgoro was driven by an ingrained sense of justice. In this regard, she recounted a personal story in this interview of raising repeated objections to a court interpreter's inaccurate interpretation of an accused testimony, which resulted in her being called to the presiding magistrate's chambers and to be told that she ought not to become the unrepresented accused's unofficial lawyer. Even though Justice Mokgoro moved on from being a prosecutor, she remained steadfast as an advocate of justice and steadfast in her resolve to ensure that those who occupy positions of leadership serve with integrity and humility and respected the values enshrined in our Constitution. Such resolve was evident as she chaired what came to be known as the Mokgoro Commission of Inquiry, which was set up by President Ramaphosa in 2018 after a series of damning court findings which raised doubts about whether two very senior officials of the NPA were fit to hold their positions. The commission under Judge Mokgoro found that both officials engaged in activities that undermined the rule of law, that grossly impeded the functioning of the NPA, and that were responsible for destroying public trust in an institution like the NPA, a key pillar of the criminal justice system. The Mokgoro Commission recommended their removal from office. The Mokgoro Commission was established on the heels of the state capture era, which we all know now was an attack from the inside, a stealthy and lethal war waged on the rule of law by the very people whose job it was and who swore an oath to promote and protect it, including the past leadership of the NPA. During this time, as we all know, the independence of the NPA was seriously compromised. The integrity and consciousness of members of the previous NPA leadership was called into question, which actually resulted in the Mokgoro Commission of Inquiry being set up. I took office as the NDPP just about 3 months after the commission completed its work in April 2019. In the commission's report, Justice Mokgoro called on the NPA to, and I quote, instill a strong sense of constitutional values and belief in the rule of law. She added that when these values are internalized and fought for vociferously from within the NPA, only then will the institution enjoy the confidence of the citizenry and become the prosecuting authority that South Africans deserve. Ethical leadership and integrity are sine qua non to upholding the rule of law and ensuring justice for our people. In fact, it is this very lack of ethical leadership and integrity, and as well as good governance, that is fueling corruption in our country. And Justice Mokgoro will be glad to know that over the past 5 years, we've been working hard in the NPA to turn this around and to build a strong, resilient, fit-for-purpose institution that will have the confidence of the people of South Africa.
Please wrap up.
Thank you, I will do that. I can say that today the NPA is very different from those of the past, and I want to say that we hear your words, Justice Mokgoro. We understand your deep sense of justice, and we will continue to fight the good fight to save our beautiful country. Our thoughts are with your family, colleagues, and family at this difficult time, and may you draw strength from knowing of the most incredible contributions of a trailblazing woman in Justice Mokgoro. I thank you.
Thank you very much, NDPP. The next speaker will be a representative of the South African chapter of the International Association of Women Judges, Judge President Mpahlele.
Thank you, Chief Justice, and the Deputy Chief Justice. I stand on the protocols that has already been established this morning. As we mourn the passing of this phenomenal woman and a stalwart in the South African judiciary, we also celebrate his life. In a tenure at this court, the Constitutional Court, she had an enormous contribution to the realization and reaffirmation of constitutional principles that will remain foundational in our jurisprudence and ultimately in the protection of human rights to not only South Africans, but those who permanently reside within our beautiful borders. This is demonstrated in some of the cases, and I refer to the Ben 10 one. This case concerns the responsibility of the judiciary to ensure that maintenance orders are observed. In this matter, she succinctly found that enforcement of maintenance payments not only secure the rights of children, but also upholds the dignity of women and promotes the foundational values of achieving equality and non-sexism. Her findings in this case demonstrated her relentless commitment to protection of women and children. The same goes for the matter of Khoza and others, and the Minister of Social Development and others, and Claudia and another. In her view, the importance of providing access to social assistance to all who live permanently in South Africa and the impact upon life and dignity that the denial of such accesses far outweigh the financial and immigration considerations on which the state relied. We, as the South African chapter of the International Association of Women Judges, recognize her excellent contributions to the jurisprudence of our country. Justice Mokgoro was not only a distinguished jurist, but also a beacon of hope for many women and girls. Just looking into her working life, from a nurse to the Department of Justice as a clerk, maintenance officer, and thereafter a public prosecutor. Thereafter, proceeding to be a lecturer at the University of Butatwana and now the University of the Northwest. And she later became an associate professor. She rose above the systematic barriers to become the embodiment of resilience and determination and the advancement of women's rights in our country. She was part of the inaugural South African Constitutional Court. She, to us, was a trailblazer as the first black woman to serve in this court. To us, it showed that it is also possible for other people. She set a good example for the rest of us. Being born and bred in Khalishiwe, in Kimberley, her appointment as the first black woman to serve at the highest judicial level in the country was a beacon of hope to many women and young girls, especially to us who grew up in the townships and the rural areas. Justice Mokgoro was a patron of our chapter, the South African chapter of the IAWJ. We as a chapter were also privileged that Justice Mokgoro served as a member of our Presidential Advisory Board. The chapter was graced with a presence in many of our AGMs. I remember when she was our guest speaker in Kimberley, it was befitting for our then president, the Deputy Chief Justice Maya, then to pen a letter to her and thank her that even in her retirement, she was still interested. She did not only deliver her speech and left, she spent the whole weekend with us, still showing interest she's still being interested in us as women judges. And she was the guest speaker again at our launch of our first journal. So the chapter recognizes and acknowledges unwavering support. And through you, Chief Justice, I just want to go through the letter that the chapter in appreciation wrote to her. And I'm so proud and happy that she had an opportunity to receive this letter on her 70th birthday, just to know that how much we appreciated her input. I'm going to read this letter. I try to be very fast. I quote verbatim.
I hope it's not too long.
No, it's a very short letter.
Okay, because you are out of time. Okay, please wrap up.
It would be amiss of us to be left out as you celebrate this very important milestone in your life, when we consider ourselves to have benefited the most and continue to be recipients of your fountain of knowledge. As a chapter, we consider ourselves privileged and blessed to be associated with you. You have been more than our patron, but a mother whose breasts never run dry, a mother hen who covers her chicks under her wings and protects them all the time. Being a woman in the legal profession has always been marked by resistance and obstacles from all corners of life, from societal norms and stereotypes to patriarchy, which plays the role of women in the kitchen. You have, however, showed us that obstacles in one's way are but just a milestone to be overcome and to be used to climb to greater heights. By watching your example, women all over the globe have been inspired not to let anything stand in their way and to excel, not only in the legal profession, but in whatever goal they set themselves to achieve. Indeed, you are the epitome of excellence and poise. I close quote. In that note, I like to say rest in peace, Justice Mokgoro, and we promise as a chapter that that beacon of hope through your legacy will live on through us to all the women in South Africa, and especially to the young girls who are still studying and aspiring to enter the profession. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much, JP. The next speaker will be the Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development.
Chief Justice and Deputy Chief Justice, and I'll identify or follow the protocol set by the Chief Justice, but I do want to in particular acknowledge retired Justices Goldstone and Krichler, who were part of that original constitutional court that was set up 30 years ago. and then, of course, to the Mokgoro and the Buffels family. We're humbled and honored to meet here today to pay tribute to a gifted jurist, a spirited activist, a highly respected researcher and academic, a fighter for social cohesion, a champion of our Constitution, and an exceptional human being. For Justice Mokgoro was all of these and so much more. As the first black woman to be appointed to the Constitutional Court bench, she was a pioneer and a trailblazer. She brought to the bench into our country's jurisprudence, what she brought to the bench into our country's jurisprudence will forever be part of her legacy. If there was one person who was the embodiment of the spirit of Ubuntu, it was Justice Mokgoro. Upon receiving the George Bezos Human Rights Award in 2022, her colleague, Justice Albie Sachs, said, and I quote, "Yvonne was Ubuntu in action and Ubuntu in court." In the book called Making the Road by Walking, The Evolution of the South African Constitution, there's a whole chapter dedicated to the life and work of Justice Mokgoro, and the authors say, and I quote, "Although she was not the only judge to rely on Ubuntu in her judgments, the way Mokgoro approached this value was in a deeper and a more Africanist way. Rather than focusing on the universality of the concept of Ubuntu, Mokgoro embedded her understanding of this value in her heritage and her identity as an African woman. Notably, she was also emphasized the interrelationship between Ubuntu and reconciliation in law, arguing for a less punitive and more restorative justice system. Her pronouncements on Ubuntu in the Makwanyana, Xhosa, and Dikoko cases in particular continue to resonate as legal discourse that reflects the kind of care required by the Constitution." And that's the end of the quote. It was these elements of compassion and care which shaped Justice Mokgoro throughout her life and her career. She had said that she had always known that she wanted to work with people, and therefore, after matriculating from St. Boniface, the local Catholic school in Kimberley, she enrolled for a degree in education as she wanted to become a teacher. And as you've heard from Eunice Masipa from the Law Society, it was Robert Sobukwe who we need to thank for Justice Mokgoro deciding to become a lawyer instead. And she decided after that incident and exchange to study law. And with a B Juris, an LLB, and 2 LLM degrees later, we can all agree that that was an excellent decision. Through all the different phases of her life and her career, we see people, and specifically her care and compassion for people, as central in her life. Early in her life, she started working as a nursing assistant, later a clerk in the Department of Justice of Bophuthatswana, later a maintenance officer, and then a public prosecutor, as the NDPP has spoken about. It was in the areas of research and teaching law and in her life as an academic where, as the book I mentioned earlier correctly states, her rise was indeed meteoric. To be the first black woman to be appointed to the Constitutional Court will always be a moment of enormous significance, not only for our courts, but for our democracy and in our history as a country. And Justice Mokgoro will always be remembered as a trailblazer and one who continues to inspire generations of women to study law and to enter the legal profession. I was particularly struck by one article I read which so clearly illustrated the impact that apartheid had on Justice Mokgoro, even as she was on her way quite literally to the Constitutional Court. In the article, it tells of how the Constitutional Court was temporarily housed in Braam Park before moving to Constitutional Hill. With Justice Mokgoro being unfamiliar with Johannesburg's roads, she asked her eldest son, Tati, who's sitting behind me, to drive her to the court to prepare for her first day at work. And she says, "I remember we drove on the M1 and Tati looked in the rearview mirror and said, 'Mama, there's a police van following us.' The police van stopped them and then took them to the Brixton police station on suspicion that their car was stolen. They were later released without an apology." Here was the very first black woman judge of the Constitutional Court, a leading human rights scholar on her way to the very institution which is the upper guardian of people's human rights, and the institution which would help transform our society in the pursuit of equality, freedom, and dignity. and she is being stopped by an instrument of apartheid stereotyping and discrimination. And when I think of that, I remind myself yet again that after 3 decades of democracy, all of us must ensure that we uphold human rights and the human dignity, the freedom and equality of others. We must uphold and protect the integrity of our courts and those who serve on the bench. We must uphold and protect the Constitution and the rule of law. Justice Mokgoro would expect no less from us. Justice Mokgoro shaped the laws of our country not only as a jurist on the bench, but also in the 16 years she served as the chairperson of the South African Law Reform Commission, thereby infusing a human rights-based approach into our law. In an interview, she once said that she sees her role, and I quote, "having great responsibility to my people, to justice in this country, to assist in providing people with what is necessary to improve the quality of their lives." And improve the quality of people's lives she most certainly did. The poet Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote about what success is, and he writes that success is to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to leave the world a bit better, to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. It sounds as though this could have been written especially for her. I know she was particularly fond of the work of Maya Angelou. Perhaps one of the most famous sayings of Maya Angelou is where she writes that, and I quote, "I've learned people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." This timeless wisdom reminds us that we all leave a legacy. In the case of Justice Mokgoro, through her career and through her various judgments and legal writing, she stood up for the vulnerable and the oppressed. She advocated the human rights of women and children. She ensured and guaranteed that the law protects those who are most vulnerable, and this had an enormous impact on people's lives. It's best captured in the Causa judgment where she writes, and I quote, "The right of access to social security, including social assistance for those unable to support themselves and their dependents, is entrenched because as a society we value human beings and want to ensure that people are afforded all their basic needs. A society must seek to ensure that the basic necessities of life are accessible to all if it is to be a society in which human dignity, freedom, and equality are foundational." She was regularly requested to serve on many boards and institutions, such as the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, to lecture at various universities, to serve on the Council of the University of Venda, to chair the UN Human Rights Council's racial justice body, to name but a few. I think the enormous number of tributes that have and continue to pour in show how highly respected and how dearly loved she was by so many people across all sectors of society, both in South Africa and internationally. On behalf of the executive, I want to convey our sincere condolences to the Mokgoro and Buffels families, and I also want to thank you. Thank you for sharing her with us as a nation. A great tree has fallen. She will be sorely missed. But we take comfort in knowing that her legacy will live on. Her strength, her courage, her unwavering commitment to human rights, and in making the world a better place, leaves an indelible mark. She will continue to inspire many. May she rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The Acting Speaker of the National Assembly.
Chief Justice, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of myself, Ndate Masondo, the chairperson, and her deputy, Sylvia Lucas, and all presiding officers, including membership of political parties, their leadership, and chairpersons of various committees, who, circumstances being otherwise, would have been absolutely glad to be here. We bring greetings and condolences. We are, however, saddened by the death of Justice Mokgoro, at a time we continue to need her presence in our judiciary as a strong female principled leader. Our collective vision as a country to create an unracial and sexist democratic society is affected and impacted by her death, depriving us of her Ubuntu-inspired leadership. In so doing, advancing indigenous knowledge systems. When one of us permanently, as she has done, goes, it becomes difficult to close a gap in our lives, in the life of the country, in the life of the judiciary itself, of talented individuals like Justice Mokgoro was. This morning's memorial service is an emotional, painfully final farewell to a loved one we will no longer see. We will be left, however, in different ways with her various memories we will forever remember and cherish. Our recollections, though, can only be fragments of her rich life. She has taken others with her, never to be known. Her legacy stands as a valuable example for young ones, whatever their gender, following in her footsteps. She is among those who permanently broke the so-called glass ceiling, into higher echelons in her profession, like Justice Maya is doing today, offering fatal blows to patriarchy and chauvinism. Justice Mokgoro's death inevitably also raises questions about transformation in the judiciary and the pace it is taking. Its success, transformation of this sector, also depends on the mentorship, coaching that gets done by experienced professionals like she was. Dignity, fairness, and justice remains the objective we must pursue in all our institutions we represent today, with passion and determination in her honor. The educational sector of work in the judiciary, I am sure, must be reeling with shock of her permanent departure, when it was still expecting so much from her. Inevitably, it also means the safety on the road is more than a priority and must receive better quality attention from the relevant authorities we oversee. To the Buffels and Mokgoro family, let us all say, tsela tshweu mme ho ya boya batho ke mo re yang bohle o tsamaye ka khotso ho malapa ohle le metswalle basebetsi mmoho re ha wa hlase sa hlaheng go tlatswang ke boteng ba rona mona hopolang hore wa hae mosebetsi o phethile le ha a sa pheta toro tsa hae tsohle. Chief Justice, myself and Honorable Masondo were watching with absolute interest with your timekeeping duty. We cannot learn from the judiciary in this great manner of work. We really wish well to both families and all families affected by this. We hope that the people, neighbors and all who've been visiting them all along since this bad news occurred have granted them solace to keep going and strong and to remember her beautiful memories to them. And thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you very much. I will now pay tribute on behalf of the judiciary But before I do so, I wish to thank all the speakers who have spoken and expressed their tributes to the family and all of us who feel the loss that has occurred. Where does one begin to express one's loss when one has lost someone so special? Where does one begin when one expresses one's loss about somebody who played such an important role in laying foundations for our constitutional democracy as one of the first 11 justices of the Constitutional Court. Justice Yvonne Mokgoro was one of the first 11 justices of the Constitutional Court to be appointed in 1994. She was one of 2 women appointed to the court and the first black woman. She had initially not intended to study law, but was encouraged by Robert Sobukwe to study law. We are grateful that she took that advice. And we are grateful that Robert Sobukwe gave her that advice. We are grateful because of what she ultimately became to this country as a lawyer and a justice of this court. I have no doubts that Robert Sobukwe, had he still been alive in 1994, would have been overjoyed to see her take her oath of office as one of the first 11 justices of this court. Justice Mokgoro's journey that led her to the Constitutional Court was not an easy one. She was born in Galeshewe Township, Kimberley. She matriculated at the local high school, St. Boniface High School. She studied and obtained 3 degrees in South Africa, namely B.Juris, LLB, and LLM, at the then University of Bophuthatswana, now University of Northwest. She later obtained her second LLM degree from the University of Pennsylvania in the US. And to a large extent, we are told, she studied part-time because she needed to work in order to be able to fund her studies. Her first job was as a nursing assistant. Later, she worked as a retail salesperson. And before she obtained her LLB degree, she worked as a clerk in the Department of Justice in Bophuthatswana, and later she became a maintenance officer and public prosecutor in the Mabato Magistrates Court. Later on, she was appointed as a law lecturer in the Department of Jurisprudence at the University of Botswana. In due course, she was promoted to associate professor, and later on in 1992, she was appointed associate professor at the University of the Western Cape. Indeed, later she also lectured at the University of Pretoria, which is where she was when she was appointed as a justice of this court. One can see from this brief history that before she was appointed to the Constitutional Court, Justice Mokgoro was exposed to different aspects of law as a maintenance officer, as a prosecutor, but also as a lecturer, law lecturer, and professor of law. At different stages, she taught constitutional law, human rights law, customary law, comparative law, and other laws. When one reads Justice Mokgoro's judgments, particularly in the early years of this court, one is not able to see that Justice Mokgoro had not been a judge before being appointed to this court. Indeed, one cannot see that she had not been exposed to practice as a lawyer. Of course, she brought into this court her experience as a prosecutor. She brought into this court her experience as a law lecturer and a professor of law. It is by now well known that the first 11 justices of this court declared the death penalty unconstitutional in Makwanyala, and that in that matter, a number of them wrote individual judgments. Justice Mokgoro also wrote a separate judgment in which she expressed her agreement with Justice Chaskelson's judgment outlawing the death penalty. Justice Mokgoro said in part, and I quote, "In interpreting the Bill of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms as an all-inclusive value system of common values, South Africa could form a basis upon which to develop a South African human rights jurisprudence. Although South Africans have a history of deep divisions characterized by strife and conflict, one shared value and ideal that runs like a golden thread across cultural lines is the value of Ubuntu. A notion now coming to be generally articulated in this country." Close quotes. The reference to Ubuntu in this passage in Justice Mokgoro's judgment had to be seen in the context of the fact that the post-embargo of the interim constitution included a reference to a need for Ubuntu, but not for victimization. Justice Mokgoro went on to explain Ubuntu as humaneness and said that, and I quote, in its most fundamental sense, it translates as personhood and morality, close quotes. She said that while Ubuntu, open quotes, envelops the key values of group solidarity, compassion, respect, human dignity, conformity to basic norms, and collective unity, in its fundamental sense, it denotes humanity and morality, close quotes. Justice Mokgoro looked beyond the shores of South Africa to see what she could find in other jurisdictions that could be compared with or could be seen to have features of Ubuntu. She said, and I quote, in American jurisprudence, courts have recognized that the dignity of the individual in American society is the supreme value. Even the most evil offender, it has been held, remains a human being possessed of a common human dignity, thereby making the calculated process of the death penalty inconsistent with its basic fundamental value, close quotes. Justice Mokgoro also looked at the Hungarian jurisprudence and pointed out that in Hungarian jurisprudence, and I quote, the right to life and the right to human dignity are protected as twin rights in section 54(1) of that constitution. They are viewed as an inseparable unity of rights. Not only are they regarded as indivisible rights, but they also have been held to be the genesis of all rights, close quotes. Justice Mokgoro went on to say that as the Constitution evolved to overcome the culture of gross human rights violations of the past, open quotes, jurisprudence in South Africa would simultaneously develop a culture of respect for and protection of basic human rights, close quotes. She said, in her view, life and dignity were like two sides of the same coin. She said, the concept of Ubuntu embodies both of them. A reading of a few judgments by Justice Mokgoro in this court, as well as some of her articles, reveals quite clearly that she was very much alive to the need for the protection of vulnerable groups in our society. One of the most well-known of her judgments, namely COSA, is proof of this. In that case, legislation excluded non-citizens from benefiting from social security. Certain Mozambicans who were permanent residents in South Africa challenged the constitutional validity of their exclusion from the social security benefits on the basis that they were not citizens, even though they were permanent residents and otherwise qualified for these benefits. The exclusion in the legislation had been enacted despite the fact that Section 27(1)(c) of our Constitution provided that, and I quote, everyone has the right to have access to, C, social security including if they are unable to support themselves and their dependents, appropriate social assistance, close quotes. Justice Mokgoro held that the word everyone in section 27.1 included non-citizens, and that therefore it would include foreigners who were permanent residents in South Africa. Speaking in the context of the purpose of providing access to social security to those in need, Justice Mokgoro had this to say, which underlines her appreciation for the need to protect the vulnerable groups. I quote, "The right of access to social security, including social assistance for those unable to support themselves and their dependents, is entrenched because as a society we value human beings and want to ensure that people are afforded their basic needs. A society must seek to ensure that the basic necessities of life are accessible to all if it is to be a society in which human dignity, freedom, and equality are foundational," close quotes. In that case, an appropriate remedy was granted to enable permanent residents to access social security. Another case in which she wrote a judgment that I believe is important is FNB versus Land and Agricultural Bank of South Africa. When Justice Mokgoro had to deal with the constitutional validity of legislation that allowed a bank to attach and sell a debtor's property in execution without recourse to a court of law, and which legislation allowed a bank to also have a preference claim to the proceeds of the sale in execution, she had no hesitation in concluding that the legislation violated the rule of law in that it allowed self-help on the part of a bank, and for that reason, the legislation she held was invalid, and ordered that pending the correction of the constitutional defect, the bank was interdicted from acting on the basis of the impugned provisions. Another case which shows, again, her appreciation for the need for the protection of vulnerable groups is Labi Odam. It involves foreign teachers. Certain regulations excluded foreigners from employment in permanent teaching posts in the Northwest Province. Certain foreign teachers were temporarily occupied. Some of those posts challenged the constitutional validity of this regulation. Justice Mokgoro concluded that the impugned regulations were inconsistent with Section 8.2 of the Interim Constitution. She held that Regulation 2.2, which was the impugned provision, constituted unfair discrimination against permanent residents, open quotes, because they are excluded from employment opportunities even though they have been permitted to enter the country, close quotes. These are some of the cases which show that Justice Mokgoro had a full appreciation for the need to protect vulnerable groups in our society. The case to which I've just referred as FNB was decided in line with another judgment of hers in Chief Lesapo, which dealt exactly with the same issue. It is not necessary to go into many judgments that Justice Mokgoro wrote. It is important, however, to mention that Justice Mokgoro's contribution should not be confined to only those judgments that she wrote, because she was one of the first 11. She was one of a team, a member of a team. And to confine her contribution only to the judgments that she wrote would suggest that she did not make contributions in regard to the judgments written by her colleagues. And courts that sit and bank, such as this one, are courts where the contribution of colleagues in judgment writing are very important. Therefore, it is important that apart from us looking at judgments that she wrote, we should also look at judgments that were written by her colleagues in which she took part, because as a member of the court, in those cases, she too contributed. That takes us to the contribution of the first 11 of this court. After their appointment in 1994, the first 11 justices of this court had to lay a foundation for jurisprudence that would sustain our constitutional democracy. They had no precedent inside the country to guide them. They had to start afresh and see what precedents they could get from other jurisdictions in order to start shaping the foundation of our own jurisprudence here. Justice Mokgoro was part of that. And the first 11 of this court went on to establish a very strong foundation on which subsequent justices of this court would benefit and which they would use in order to protect and promote the fundamental rights entrenched in the Constitution, as well as to promote, defend, and protect our constitutional democracy. This court continues to benefit from the wisdom left for us by the Constitutional Court First 11 of 1994. Justice Mokgoro and his colleagues of the time gave many judgments which changed the lives of many people in this country. Some of those that would have been close to Justice Mokgoro's heart would be cases such as Bay, which abolished the principle of male primogeniture in customary law, which had worked against women. Another one would have been Shilwan, which opened the doors for women to become traditional leaders. Indeed, in 2013, when she had left this court, Justice Mokgoro would have been happy to hear or read MM, a judgment of this court, which ensured that men who wanted to take a second and further wife in polygamous marriages would not just need to consult the existing wife or wives, but would need their consent before they could take another wife. Of course, Justice Mokgoro was part of the treatment action campaign judgment of this court, which saved many lives, where this court ordered government to allow hospitals to make nevirapine available to pregnant mothers. Of course, Justice Mokgoro was part of the Van Rooyen and his judgments of this court, which are very important for the independence of the judiciary. And that brings me to this issue. And it is an issue that I mentioned in my address on Thursday at the funeral. Namely, how are we going to remember her? As individuals, as groups, as sectors. Each one of us can choose that they will make her passing to be just a normal passing and nothing will change. But we can also choose to say the passing on of somebody so special to our constitutional democracy cannot be a normal passing on. And that we will commit ourselves to doing something that we know they would have wanted us to do in order to make sure that our constitutional democracy thrives, is protected, and is defended, and that the independence of the judiciary is strengthened and protected. I have no doubt that within the judiciary, there are many of us who recommit ourselves to continuing where Justice Mokgoro left off in terms of fighting for the independence of the judiciary, in terms of advancing human rights, in terms of protecting our constitutional democracy. To the Mokgoro family and the Buffel family, on behalf of the judiciary of South Africa, I wish to convey our heartfelt condolences. We cannot begin to imagine the suffering that you have gone through. But we are with you. And we are going to celebrate the life of this extraordinary jurist, this extraordinary South African, this extraordinary woman. And the way to do so for us is to do our work in a way that will advance human rights, that will protect our independence that will ensure that we protect this democracy. Thank you very much to you for sharing Justice Mokgoro with us. We will continue to benefit for a long time from her judgments, from her wisdom, as we will find in her judgments. I'm particularly glad that amongst us today are some of the justices who were appointed with her in 1994. As we say, we remember and honor her today. Thank you very much. I had already thanked all the speakers for their contributions. What now remains for me is to indicate that we are going to adjourn, but there are going to be refreshments in the foyer. So when you leave this chamber, please go to the foyer, and the clerks of this court will guide you to the foyer. But also, we will also join you there. We have therefore come to the end of these proceedings, and we are going to adjourn. The court adjourns.